Hello, everybody. Happy Friday to you. We are with you for another edition of Edmentum, Illinois Presents Friday Fact, Fiction, and Fuzzy. Kevin Gallman, my colleague here in Illinois, is with me as usual. And this week, we're continuing on with this trend. We had Jeremy Paul on last week as an alternative building principal. And we've got Flor Carter with us here today, who is the principal at the Alternative and Optional Education Center in Waukegan D60 in Lake County. She is on Twitter at fcarter85. Make sure that you follow her. We want to boost her Twitter following. Flor, it's great to see you. How are you this morning?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me. I feel honored to be able to participate in your segment.
We're happy to have you, Flor, and it's great just because this is going to allow us to continue this conversation on ideas on how to best serve kids who are in an alternative setting. So I'm going to start you off right away, Flor, with a fact, something that you know to be true in education these days.
So what I know to be true is that the students that are coming to our schools, and this is not just in Waukegan, this is not just in Illinois, this is nationwide, and the numbers are probably slightly different worldwide, but we know that in this country, at least 50% of our students are coming to us with at least one incident of trauma. And those numbers are likely to change now after COVID. A lot more students are experiencing traumatic events during this time. But we have to, and what I also know to be fact is that we have to change what we're doing to support students who come to us with trauma. So the traditional things that we've historically been doing to educate our students aren't necessarily working to meet their social emotional needs. So here at AOEC, we've made a big shift to trauma-informed instruction.
Yeah, I heard on the radio yesterday, Flor, that this people are saying that once we are through the tunnel here with COVID and we look back on it and have some perspective, it's actually the disruptive nature of it. The most comparable event before COVID would have been World War II. So the idea of trauma impacting more kids and more families now is absolutely something to be true.
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of focus nationally about the impact of COVID on the academics. And is there an impact on having kids in some states and some cities out of school for 13 or more months now? Absolutely, there is going to be an academic impact, but what we need to focus on more is that social emotional impact. Our students, we know this to be true, that our students, if their basic needs are not met, when they enter our building every day, if they do not have their basic needs met, they cannot focus on their education. We're not going to be able to instruct them on anything. And so our focus needs to be we need to meet every student where they're at. And right now, a lot of them are in a place where the focus needs to be on supporting them socially and emotionally. Some of the students are scared to return to in-person learning for various reasons. They've been alone, they've been isolated with only family members for 13 months now. And that's a difficult transition to come back, especially if in our building, some of our students are here for school anxiety or for other social anxiety reasons. And so we have to be really cognizant of what is keeping them from wanting to return to in-person learning. And if they do make the decision to come back to in-person learning, what supports that they need once they get here.
So a lot there, and I think that touching on that idea of, we talk so much about the academics in that learning loss, or however you want to describe it. And then we don't always move into the SEL portion. What's another fiction or something else that may not be true that you've observed during this time?
So I think in our setting, I'm going to focus on my building again, AOEC, or the alternative setting as a whole. I think a lot of times outsiders view alternative schools as where all the bad kids go, students that are less than. And that is my biggest fiction that I will communicate with everyone. The students that are in alternative settings were failed by the traditional setting. Our students did not fail in the traditional setting. The traditional setting failed them. And they just need something different. And that's what we're here to provide for them. So that is what I know to not be true.
I love that perspective. I love, that simple way of describing it. And I think that makes a lot of sense. So now we move on to the fuzzy portions. So something that is warm and fuzzy, something, love to brag about for the school, or maybe something that's still a little bit unclear as we move into the spring, summertime.
So students just returned this week to our building to in-person instruction. And when one of the students walked in on Monday morning, she had a hat on. I didn't know I couldn't tell who she was. I just, I said, sweetie, who are you? She told me her name. And I said, you have been working so hard in Edmentum. You are really kicking butt. I think you're going to be able to walk in graduation on May. And the look on her face, she was like, thank you for saying that. It was almost like the first time someone had acknowledged how hard she'd been working. And that's one thing I love about Edmentum, is that I can log in every day and see what every kid in my building is doing. I can see who's working, I can see who's struggling, I can see who's completing classes. And so that was a really warm and fuzzy, that was a fuzzy for me, was seeing the look on her face when I acknowledged how hard she was working and earning credits.
Well, that's a great picture of maintaining a relationship even in the remote environment, and knowing that we don't physically have to be together, but we can still give that feedback. We can still empower our students to be their best in this environment. So thank you so much for sharing, Flor. Flor Carter from the Alternative and Optional Education Center from Waukegan D60. Check her out on Twitter, and thanks for watching this week's Edmentum Friday Fact, Fiction, and Fuzzy.